Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is my review of Arthdal Chronicles, a South Korean television series from 2019. This is 18 episodes long, with each episode being approximately 80 minutes in length. Now, some people told me to watch this K-drama earlier in the year, but I had a lot of other stuff that I wanted to cover first on this channel. I think I definitely wanted to rewatch Joong. That was like my big priority during that time, so I was doing that. Then, about a month ago, I eventually checked out the cast list of this K-drama, and I realized that Ji-won Kim and Ok-bin Kim were the female leads. And I'm a big fan of both of those actresses, so that immediately piqued my interest at that point. And then I saw that Dong-gun Jang and Joong-ki Song were the male leads, and it was at that point that I immediately decided to watch this. Now, the story takes place in the fictional land of Arthdal during ancient times. There are a lot of characters and different tribes to keep track of, especially early on. After a while, you get used to it and you can kind of track things. But the first few episodes, it's a little daunting. But we basically have 4 lead characters who are played by the aforementioned actors. Eun-sum, played by Joong-ki Song, was born with a fate to bring disaster to Arthdal. Taeal-ha, played by Ji-won Kim, associates with Eun-sum and is the successor of the Wahan Tribe and is destined to be the Great Mother. Ta-gon, played by Dong-gun Jang, is a war hero of Arthdal because his men massacred the Neanthals, which were a physically strong species of humans that allegedly posed a threat to the kingdom. And then there's Taeal-ha, played by Ok-bin Kim, who associates with Ta-gon and makes some power plays right from the beginning of the show, kind of like working behind the scenes. Now, Arthdal Chronicles has some problems. It does have some problems here. Most of the criticism that I'm about to mention, there's like a half a dozen lines of criticism, are specifically related to the opening 10 to 11 episodes in particular. So first of all, Eun-sum is a pretty bland, generic hero character. He really doesn't have much of a distinct personality, I found. Definitely the least interesting character out of our main 4 that I mentioned. And I enjoyed Joong-ki Song when I've seen him in other K-dramas like Descendants of the Sun. I thought he was good in that. He had some charisma. He really kind of owned the screen when he was on there. Here, on the other hand, he's kind of boring to watch. And I think a lot of that is due to the script, but he doesn't really bring anything else to this particular role, I think. And then, no spoilers in this review, but I'm going to give you an idea here of what to expect. The show, decides to abandon this guy's character for a huge chunk of the middle episodes. And we barely see him at all. And I really don't understand that script writing decision. They do temporarily, replace him. And I'm using quotes because if you see the show, you know what I'm talking about. They replace him with another character who's a bit more interesting. But why not spend some time giving Eun-sum some additional personality and complexity instead of just kind of treating him like a shallow pretty boy? That's kind of what he is in this show. So not too interesting of that for that character. Second, it's a bit difficult to get invested in the show at the very beginning, I found. Obviously you got to keep track of a lot of characters and tribes. But the story itself it's kind of generic, I think. There is a dramatic conflict that emerges during episodes 2 and 3 that kind of gets you on track here in terms of a viewer. It gets your blood boiling, I'll put it that way. And it really gives you a reason to hate a few of these bad guy side characters. But even that conflict just kind of fizzles out, and it gets kind of tedious and lacks nuance. We get some mustache twirling bad guys who laugh while they're decapitating people and murdering innocent civilians, and we get that on and off for multiple episodes in a row. And after a while, I was just I get it. These guys are bad. Let's move on here. Even worse, that conflict, like I said, kind of fizzles out for a while because they kind of put that on the back burner, just like our main character for a while, and focuses more on infighting between the I guess, the bad guys, so to speak. So it kind of like, I don't know, it kind of goes to the back of your mind for a while. And it by the time it comes back near the end, it's kind of lost its momentum. I don't think the story in this K-drama is dynamic enough. It fails to expand and flow in interesting directions. Instead, it just opts to be like pretty simplistic and static in its conflicts. It kind of retreads the same stuff a lot. Also, the story introduces some things only then to immediately drop them. And this really got on my nerves. Like, very early on, they introduced, like, the fastest horse ever. It's like this legendary horse, the fastest horse ever. And then it has, like, one scene, and, like, they don't do anything with it after that. I'm like, they made this horse out to be, like, this legendary steed, and then, like, they end up doing nothing with it. And so there's some frustration in that as well. It's kind of perplexing to me because the writers of this show, Arthdal Chronicles, have been associated with other really good K-dramas. I mean, you got A Jewel in the Palace, one of them worked on. I think they both worked on Queen Sun Duck, which had a pretty good script. One of them worked on the script to the film The Front Line, which was quite good. And one of them wrote the original story that led to Joint Security Area being made. So I'm not really sure what happened in this K-drama. They have a good pedigree, they just didn't really bring it here. Third criticism. Even though there are some very nice natural environments and good production values, I was kind of frustrated at the presentation of a lot of the indoor locations during nighttime shots. I don't know if any of you have seen this show and you're seeing the same thing I'm seeing, but a lot of the indoor shots at night were very drab and boring to look at. There are a lot of scenes that have, like, I swear they put some type of, like, a haze, like, effect or, like, something over these scenes, and everything seemed very distracting to me. You know, it's almost like things just looked fuzzy during the indoor scenes. I don't know if this is a Netflix thing, maybe. Or if it was an intentional decision by the cinematographer, that was a big mistake. Because a lot of these indoor shots are just very drab and fuzzy looking. The flashbacks are also kind of annoying because they have, like, this strobe. They strobe the flashbacks, like, around the frame. So it starts strobing, and I'm just like, dude. So I don't know about some of the stylistic choices here. Fourth, some scenes feel like they drag on a bit too long. You know, I like having a scene breathe, but there are times where I think the scenes play out a bit too long, and each episode is 80 minutes long. It kind of feels that way, so I think they could have cut back a little bit on the run times. Fifth, the fighting and the battles are small in number and pretty mediocre in their execution. You know, especially in terms of camera work and editing, which is very much in the Hollywood style. Lots of edits, lots of close-up camera shots. And also they're pretty unimaginative in how they're structured and constructed and choreographed. So there's really not any highlight, like, action scenes that get your blood pumping in this. In fact, there were some times that our lead character infiltrates the enemy, I guess, I wouldn't call it a fortress, kind of like the main enemy, like, area, and they don't even show him do it. Like, there'll be a scene where you see, like, an antagonist character, and all of a sudden the protagonist will walk behind them with a knife and, like, you know, get what they want from him or question them. I'm like, why didn't you show the guy, like, get past the guards at least? Like, give me a little suspense here. There were a few battles that took place in darkened rooms where you could barely see anything. That's not good. And for the purposes of comparison, Jumong had way better fight scenes, and that show came out 13 years ago. So I think they should have upped their game in terms of the action in this show. And then finally, my last big criticism is that the opening sequence of every episode is a direct ripoff of Game of Thrones. As soon as I saw episode 1 start, I was just like, don't do that, man. Don't do that. Because all it does is it immediately forces you to make comparisons with one of the most popular shows of all time. You don't want to be doing that. I thought that was a bad decision. Because outside of some general similarities, Arthdal Chronicles is actually quite different from Game of Thrones. And I've seen every Game of Thrones episode, including Season 8. But, you know, this is actually quite different from Game of Thrones. I think some people out there have made, you know, they think there's a lot of comparisons, but I think they're kind of stretching it. This actually plays out quite differently in terms of story, I think. But with all of that said, all of those negatives and flaws, I was starting to get frustrated with this show when I got to, like, episode 10, Like, when I got to episode 10, I was actually thinking of doing a video where I was just tearing the show apart, which I kind of did already, right? But, I was starting to get a little bit pissed, because I was like, this is still going to be a complete waste of my time. But then, episode 11 happened, and episode 11 was pretty good. Gives you a nice little confrontation near the end, which I liked. And then episode 12 was actually legitimately entertaining. You know what I mean? It kind of ramps up the main dilemma of Ji-won Kim's character, and it provides some, I would say, exciting dramatic moments. So after episode 12, I was like, man, this show turned itself around pretty fast here. Like, I can get on board with this, because the story stops spinning its wheels, and we're actually getting some progress here. Instead of, dull dialogue and dimly lit indoor locations for so many episodes. So I was starting to like it. And then after that, our main protagonist, who did nothing for like 8 episodes, starts doing something. So I'm like, wow, this is actually kind of entertaining now. So the show gets on track eventually. I would say I enjoyed the last 7 or 8 episodes. I think they were moderately entertaining. The problem is that, there's a bunch of mediocre episodes to get to that point, in my opinion. Another positive aspect I'd like to point out is the acting. Everyone is good in this. I mean, it's no surprise when you got Ok-bin Kim, Ji-won Kim, and Dong-gun Jang present. I mean, I enjoyed watching them act even during the less impressive episodes. So that's a positive that can help you get through the slower parts. Arthdal Chronicles, I think, finishes strong, which does kind of go a long way in terms of your final impressions. If it started strong and ended badly, it would leave a bad taste in your mouth. But it started weak and ended strong, so you kind of have a good taste in your mouth when it ends. But I would think, despite all of its shortcomings, it eventually does hit its stride and becomes an entertaining affair during its latter episodes. However, I do not think that Arthdal Chronicles is a slam dunk must-see viewing experience, which is kind of surprising because this one is one of the most highly anticipated K-dramas of 2019, given its high budget, its premise, and its star power. And in that sense, I think it's kind of a disappointment because it's simply not as good as it should have been. I've read that it got a little bit lower viewership than they were hoping for and a little bit more criticism than they were expecting. Nevertheless, there's a good chance that it's going to get another season in the future, which is important because episode 18 of this season does not resolve most of the conflicts or dilemmas. This is like a season 1 of a 2-season or plus show. They really need like at least a dozen or more episodes at the very least to wrap everything up. So if I draw a line in the sand and force myself to either recommend or not recommend Arthdal Chronicles, I'd have to put it this way. It's kind of hard. I would wait. If you have not seen the show yet, I would wait to see if they produce a second season. If they don't make a second season, I don't think I would bother watching this. There's too many open threads left, and the first half of the show isn't good enough to justify watching the whole thing. However, if they do make a second season, you'll have to ask yourself a question. Do you have enough patience to sit through some mediocre episodes to get to the good stuff later on? And then if they do the second season and finish the story, then I would say maybe give it a shot, if it sounds good to you. But I don't think this is a must-see K-drama. So that's kind of my complicated way of kind of reviewing this one. There's a lot of negatives, there's some positives, and it's kind of it's hard to throw my weight one way or another. But that's my advice for you. This is available on Netflix in the United States, and as always, I'll see you next time.